Okay, what you're hearing, I hope you can hear it, is Billie Holiday, the great Billie Holiday, who is very much to the point today. We're going to look at Frank O'Hara's wonderful poem, The Day Lady Died. Um, and I will kind of lower her down. Um, it's well, I won't say anything about it. I'll just go right into it and read it. But first, Frank O'Hara was a poet who died altogether too young. He was only 40 years old. He was, while he, during the time he wrote his poetry, he was also an assistant curator at the Museum of Modern Art and was very active in the art world and was killed at 40. He was hit by by a car in the wee hours when he was with some people recreating at Fire Island Beach, and he died not immediately, but within a day or two. Appalling, just as I say, 40 years old. This poem is from his book Lunch Poems, which is out in Lawrence Ferlinghetti's City Lights Books. Um, a lot of these, we're, I guess, supposed to believe were either written or worked on during his lunch hours from his job as assistant curator at the Museum of Modern Art, and some of them are actually seem to be about what things he did and saw during his lunch breaks in that job. So, and this is The Day Lady Died is one of those. It seems. So I'll just lurch right into it here. The Day Lady Died. It is 12:20 in New York, a Friday, 3 days after Bastille Day. Yes, it is 1959, and I go get a shoe shine because I will get off the 419 in East Hampton at 7:15 and then go straight to dinner, and I don't know the people who will feed me. I walk up the muggy street beginning to sun and have a hamburger and a malted and buy an ugly New World writing to see what the poets in Ghana are doing these days. I go on to the bank, and Miss Stillwagon, first name Linda I once heard, doesn't even look up my balance for once in her life, and in the Golden Griffin I get a little Verlaine for Patsy with drawings by Bonnard, although I do think of Hesiod, trans Richmond Lattimore, or Brendan Behan's new play, or Les Balcons, or Les Nègres of Genet, but I don't. I stick with Verlaine after practically going to sleep with Quandriness. And for Mike, I just stroll into the Park Lane liquor store and ask for a bottle of Strega, and then I go back where I came from to 6th Avenue and the Tobacconist in the Ziegfeld Theater, and casually ask for a carton of Gauloises and a carton of Picayunes and a New York Post with her face on it. And I am sweating a lot by now and thinking of leaning on the John door in the 5 spot while she whispered a song along the keyboard to Mal Waldron, and everyone and I stopped breathing. Okay, I think that's a really wonderful poem. I think overall, I think what's going on there is that the poem is sort of staging a response to the death of Billie Holiday within this structure of movement from um, starting from a preoccupation with time as this kind of enveloping condition of human life onto a contemplation of the way in which it's opposite, that is timelessness or the eternal or the infinite, however you want to think of that, in more than one aspect of that term, presses on our imaginations, on our consciousness, on our sense of ourselves and our fundamental condition as mortal beings. Put another way, it's a poem that's in a kind of transit between this experience and perception of being immersed and engrossed in time, circumstanced within it, conditioned by it, bound by it, but also animated by it, deriving structure and direction from it in a way we can't do without, and then moving on toward this moment of devastating but I would say exquisite stillness. So time is an insistent presence right off, I would say, in that first stanza. There are no fewer than 6, and perhaps as many as 8 explicit time markers just in the first stanza of 6 shortish lines. He says it's 12:20 in New York, a Friday, 3 days after Bastille Day. It's 1959. He is looking forward to getting the 4:19 train and getting off that train at 7:15. So there are 6 right there, but you could say that 3 days after Bastille Day comprehends 3 three invocations of time. There's 3 days as a unit of time. Bastille Day is a point in time. And then 3 days after Bastille Day is arguably yet another. So there could be as many as 8 right there. So, and I think you can also notice one thing that's nice to do in a poem is to note where the stresses fall. There's a whole practice for that called scansion, of course, where you identify the units, the feet, poetic feet, which are defined by how the stresses fall within them. Most of them are 2 syllables, but there are 3 and 4 syllable poetic feet. But in this one, you'll notice that the all the time references receive emphasis, receive a stress. It's 12:20. I'd say both those syllables get stressed. A Friday, the first syllable is stressed. 3 days after Bastille Day, so 3 days. I think both those get stressed, which would make that a spondy. That would be the name of the poetic foot with 2 stressed syllables. After Bastille Day, 1959. 1959. You might say that. You might really stress a lot in those syllables. Getting off the 4:19, the 7:15. And I think it's perhaps we would naturally say it that way. But the falling of those stanzas, those stresses so heavily on those syllables in that stanza, I think it reinforces this sense of the pressure of time, because it gives them there's this downward momentum or gravity on them, just as you're noting the time, and you get the sense of his feeling the pressure of time, and it kind of reinforces that, I think. So the sense that first stanza is of a person impelled along this temporal axis. He's driven along by what he needs to do, maybe shunted and harried and hemmed in and so on by the urgencies of his responsibilities under the pressure of time. And again, not that it's all suffering and drudgery. Whatever pressure our protagonist is under to get things done in the time that he has, these errands don't seem like they're wholly unpleasant. He's buying things for people he cares about. He's looking forward to dinner somewhere. He may be slightly apprehensive because he doesn't know the people who've invited him, but nonetheless, it's not all a feeling of imprisonment. Even when there is pressure, there's obviously it's just more nuanced than that. The essential thing is that our condition, I suppose, as creatures of time, seems to be a point insisted on in this first stanza, and we note that the words kind of spill out in this unbroken exhale, word following word with almost no punctuation and seeming very spontaneous. All the ands, this and this and this and this, one thing happening after another, and kind of inexorably, which is another way of describing time. Another thing to note, I think, is that some of the place names, the New World, the journal New World Writing and the Golden Griffin, that's a bookstore, I have to think. The Park Lane Liquor Store, New York Post, these are rendered in all caps. And I think that they create the impression of being, signs that are crowding into your field of vision, and contributing to this furiously active and congested and clotted place and moment in a in a large city. And then there's this polyglot blending of cultures and other kinds of sensory stimulations. The way the the New World writing, he's checking out some poets from Ghana. There's he's looking for a gift he gets Verlaine from Patsy with drawings by Bonnard. But he's thinking of Hesiod, the ancient Greek poet, or Brendan Bann's play, the Irish poet Brendan Bann, Genet, but he goes back to Verlaine, the Bottle of Strega, all these kind of influences from around the world. You get this sense that the whole world is present to him as he strolls at large through the streets of this metropolis. And everything moves pretty briskly until about the middle of the third stanza, when something interesting, I think, kind of interesting happens. There seems to be a foreshadowing of the final stanza, as all the frenetic motion of everything to that point slows down or seems suspended as he stops to second guess himself in the choice of a gift for this Patsy person. He mentions that he feels sleepy as he tries to figure out which of the gifts in his mind would be the best one, and he's stopped for a moment in his forward motion, and I think the sleepiness is kind of interesting. It's if sleepiness had overtaken him, it of course would dissolve this panoply of sense impressions around him and take him off the time treadmill he's on. And it just seems to be a kind of a whisper of the more grave cessation that we get at the end. So at the end of the third stanza, after he goes through all these places and does all these things and makes all these decisions and keeps moving, he gets to the Ziegfeld Theater and casually asks for a carton of Gauloises and a carton of Picayunes and a New York Post with her face on it. And that phrase, her face on it, as you can see here, I'll try to show you. You can see it drops down at the end of that line. It's still as far over horizontally, but it drops down sort of like a step down, like the bottom drops out or a trap door opens, that there's a fall or some kind of a collapse. Maybe a sense of the pull of gravity, and everything stops. I'm going to read the last stanza again. And I'm sweating a lot by now and thinking of leaning on the John door in the 5 spot while she whispered a song along the keyboard to Mal Waldron, and everyone and I stopped breathing. So all the motion stops. Everything is hushed. Everything is annihilated. We've kind of arrived at this moment of a perfect, haunting stillness. Breathing stops, and of course that word, given the fact that we're talking about her death, breathing, that's a very freighted. When he says everyone and I stop breathing, that's a pretty freighted expression in context. So, and yet it's not an emptiness. It's replete. The crowds on the streets, the signs and the ads, thrusting into his field of vision, the entire sensory overload of these Manhattan streets, everything we got in the earlier going here, all the urgencies that drive him forward are nothing beside this saturated stillness, this compound of grief at the loss of Billie Holiday, and this remembered experience of being transported, transfixed by a moment in a performance she gave. And I think of I think this kind of suspension in a state of maybe awe at the fundamental opacities of existence at these two events, one present and one past, expose him and us to in their in the way in their collision in his consciousness. So I think you've got this this binary set up, this between time and timelessness, or the finite and the eternal, um, and I think both ends of that binary are ambiguous. I think that what the poem is showing you that, and to an excruciating degree. I think we're of course creatures of time beyond salvage. Time is the condition of life. The tick-tock we live in is, in a way, the soundtrack of our own finitude, our own mortality. We at times feel burdened by time, pent up by it, dominated by it. But we're also, as I say, animated by it. It's a spur to action, to achievement, to rich and rewarding experiences. It's like oxygen in a way. Life is inconceivable apart from it. To be outside of time is to be outside of life. Therefore, not living. And yet we yearn for experiences that give us an intimation or the illusion of being outside of time. I guess because it seems to put us in touch with, in some way, put us in touch with the eternal, with what doesn't perish or waste away, with an ultimate truth that lies beyond our grasp. And that too has its dark side. There's a point of view from which eternity, in whatever terms you choose to construct that idea, is terrifying. How can any state not end? How can it be tolerable ultimately if you can never get out? And what if that state is nothingness, extinction? Serious thoughts for serious people. So I think all these kinds of reflections are suggested or permitted, maybe, by what we find in this poem. But I feel bound to say again that what's miraculous about a poem that is, I mean, all art, but we're talking about poetry, but what's miraculous about a poem that is serious and powerful and well-made is that when it meets an open-minded and open-hearted, maybe, reader, it's a living tissue. Everything I've said about it here, or anything I could say about it here or anywhere, is really just a pile of dry bones against the vitality of its unfolding in your intellect, in your aesthetic receptors, your affect, your imagination, your moral sense, whatever existential hopes or anxieties or perplexities may be loose in your mind and spirit. What's supreme is its ability to transport you, in this case, to a lived moment, or to some kind of intimate connection with another mind and spirit. And I think that's that describes this poem and what it does. So I think I will wrap it up here by reading it one more time. Oh, before I do, next time I think I'm going to do a poem by Adrienne Rich, something from her book Dream of a Common Language. I'm looking at 3 or 4 as possible choices, and I'll choose one of them. Adrienne Rich is, of course, she passed away some years ago. An eminent poet. I've been aware of her large reputation for a long time, but I haven't really read her until in any depth until the past year or so, because I'm a dummy. So I've found these to be just absolutely great. And an book of essays of hers too, I read last year. That was also great. So it's something by her next time. But now let's go back to the day Lady died. It is 12:20 in New York, a Friday, 3 days after Bastille Day. Yes, it is 1959, and I go get a shoe shine. because I will get off the 419 in East Hampton at 7:15 and then go straight to dinner, and I don't know the people who will feed me. I walk up the muggy street beginning to sun and have a hamburger and a malted and buy an ugly New World writing to see what the poets in Ghana are doing these days. I go on to the bank, and Miss Stillwagon, first name Linda I once heard, doesn't even look up my balance for once in her life. And in the Golden Griffin, I get a little Verlaine for Patsy with drawings by Bonnard, although I do think of Hesiod, trans Richmond Lattimore, or Brendan Behan's new play, or Les Balcons, or Les Nègres of Genet, but I don't. I stick with Verlaine after practically going to sleep with Quandriness. And for Mike, I just stroll into the Park Lane liquor store and ask for a bottle of Strega, and then I go back where I came from to 6th Avenue and the tobacconist in the Ziegfeld Theater, and casually ask for a carton of Gauloises and a carton of Picayunes and a New York Post with her face on it. And I am sweating a lot by now and thinking of leaning on the John door in the 5 spot while she whispered a song along the keyboard to Mal Waldron and everyone, and I stopped breathing. Okay, let's close out with some more Billie Holiday. Okay, read Frank O'Hara, listen to Billie Holiday, and be well.